Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from Marbella in Spain, and good morning in the United States, Latin America, and other parts of the world. Welcome to the official media presentation of Wine Future 2021, and I would like you to welcome Mr. David Führer, who is the co-organizer of the event and will be today our Master of Ceremonies. Thank you, David, and welcome.
Thank you, Pancho, and welcome everyone to our media conference of the Wine Future 2021. Pancho Campo and I have collaborated previously on this, but he is the founder and creator of this event, which launched in Logroño, Spain in 2009, subsequently again in Hong Kong in 2011, at which I welcomed many of our attendees coming to you in February, as well as its host. This is our attempt to online create an environment in which all sectors of the wine trade can come together to learn how we can create innovations and solutions for the problems and challenges and successes that we are all facing in these very, very unique times. And in this, Pancho will now guide you through how our process is going to continue through these webinars, which begin following our media conference today. We'll continue bi-weekly through the end of the year and commence weekly in January, leading up to our summit to occur commencing February 23rd in the year 2021. Pancho, enjoy your time with our guests.
Thank you, David. Thank you to all our audience from different parts of the world. We had a fantastic response for a media presentation. We had more than 100 registrations from different parts of the world and different backgrounds of the wine industry. As David well said, we started with this venture back in 2009 when the world was facing one of the worst economical recessions it has ever seen. Wine Future was created to acknowledge that recession and to provide solutions and inspiration to the many people that were struggling because of that economical recession. It was so successful that we decided to do a second edition 2 years later in Hong Kong because the market in those days was moving to Asia. The event was even bigger. It was very well attended with more than 80 nationalities, 50 speakers, and 3 master classes and wine tastings. Then the market, luckily we had a more stable environment around the world and we focused on climate change. We were very honored to collaborate with Taylor's and conduct the climate change leadership where President Barack Obama introduced the Porto Protocol. And then the following year, many speakers, some of those speakers will be with us in Wine Future, but we had the special participation of Vice President Al Gore. Now, Wine Future has to come back because our society has never been affected for so many crises at the same time. We have the sanitary crisis that has changed the way we do business, has affected us in all aspects of our society. We have, as consequence of the sanitary crisis, we have an economical recession that the way things are going in Europe and in other parts of the world, it could take us back to the economy that we had probably during the Second World War. We of course have the climate crisis that no matter what happens with the sanitary issues and the economics, the climate crisis and the environment is still our most important concern. And last but not least, we have a tremendous leadership crisis. A lot of countries are not coming to terms on how to tackle the pandemic. There's elections in different parts of the world. There's elections in the United States as we speak. Still, there's not a president being elected. And different industries are also suffering this lack of leadership. So basically what we have tried to do with Wine Future is a think tank, a summit where we are inviting the most experienced, the most knowledgeable, the most relevant people around the world to share what they have done to adapt to the coronavirus, to this new scenario that is affecting all of us in all 4 aspects of any problem: the science and the sanitary, the economical, the social, and other areas of business. Now I'm going to show you a few slides that will explain you better what Wine Future 2021 intends to be. The topics that we have decided to cover are the ones that you can see in your screen. What are the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic in different areas of the wine industry? There will be a panel on multiple situational analysis. We will, of course, tackle the climate crisis and the environment. What are the supply chain challenges? What are the off-premise strategies that are being implemented to cope with this pandemic? On-premises as well. What are the challenges of packaging, closures, but also bulk, private label, tariffs? Very important matter that has become prominent during this pandemic is digital marketing strategies, online sales, platforms that can be used to compensate for the lack of face-to-face events. Very important issue as well, addressing systemic inequalities. We will talk about consumption. We know that consumption has increased at home, but it has completely plummeted in restaurants and hotels. What is it going to be the outcome? After we foresee one more year of struggling with the sanitary issues, we believe that the consumption is going to go down. Wine tourism has shown the potential for overcoming some of these issues because people are looking for escaping the big cities, going to the country, going to rural areas, rural tourism. That is growing. And then, of course, we will have economical imperatives, and we will analyze what is the short and medium-term future of our wine industry. We expect, based on our past experiences, many nationalities. We had more than 80 nationalities in Hong Kong. Here we predict about 60 nationalities. A lot of journalists have signed in, and they're helping us to cover the event. We would like to see 3,000 delegates. The virtual world allows us to reach people that have never imagined they could spend money in traveling to a different country, hotels, registration. People from all over the world, from Chile to China, from Australia to New Zealand, they can and to America, they can attend this virtual event. Sponsorship is going to be difficult. Times are tight. Speakers, we have more than 40 at the moment, and we keep on having people interested in speaking, and we also are looking for more and more people that can contribute. And we will help not 2 NGOs, but 3 NGOs, because one of the goals of this event is to help 3 organizations that we believe strongly in their causes. And David, would you like to take our audience through the 3 organizations that we're trying to help?
SOS, a South African organization that Pancho has worked with in previous events he's worked with in South Africa, agreed to be part of what we are trying to accomplish there. South Africa, as I'm sure many of you know, has been suffering under tremendous issues, most notably its water crisis as of late. Not that other countries haven't. South Africa has had it worse than most, especially its wine sector as well. The recent pandemic has implicated in South Africa very strong measures with regards to alcohol sales and consumption. Secondly, the Porto Protocol, with which Pancho and I helped to engage and develop a couple of years ago with the Climate Change Leadership Conference in Porto. They are actively involved in supporting and developing this event with us. I'm very much looking forward to working with them once again. And lastly, North Bay Jobs with Justice, a California, Sonoma County-based organization with outreach throughout the state of California, is working directly with farm laborers, most notably vineyard laborers, in their quest to have, in these very trying times, especially with the fires and all in California, access to good quality housing, food, jobs that are compensated properly, and are working with vineyard owners in doing so. We look forward to working with them as well in a couple of weeks' time. All three of these entities will be part of our November 18th webinar. Thank you. I believe you're muted, Pancho.
Thank you, David. Now let's talk about the speakers, because I think, apart from the topics, and the good intentions behind the event. What makes the event remarkable is the amount of speakers and the organizations that every day are showing their support. We have 3 keynote speakers. We're looking for a 4th one that we're hoping to announce very soon. Irina Bokova, she was at the Climate Change Leadership in Porto, and she was the 9th Director General of UNESCO. She is a good friend, and she, as a UNESCO representative, values very much the importance of vineyards around the world as part of the human heritage of UNESCO. Pau Roca, Director General for the OIV, who was also present at the last event we did in Porto, and he will speak in behalf of this organization that rules the world of wine around the world. And last but not least, we have the great Francis Ford Coppola. All of those who are big admirers of The Godfather, we welcome him. He was a speaker in Wine Future Hong Kong, and he has offered himself to address the audience, not as a movie director, but as a owner of the Francis Ford Coppola winery and another winery in France. Antonio Amorim, most of these people you all know. Amorim from the Amorim company in Portugal, Subhash Arora from India, Walter Brescia in behalf of Wine Tourism of Argentina, Adrian Bridge from Taylor Sport and the mind behind the Porto Protocol, Eugeni Brotons from González Vías, Ferran Centellas, who used to be the sommelier at El Bulli and now is partners with Ferran Adrià, the famous chef, in developing the Bullipedia. Selina Kaff, president of Sodexo Magic, an NGO that has the support of Magic Johnson, Leticia Chacon Rodriguez from UC Davis, Pierre Courvoisier, Global Director, New Services of Hillebrand, Michael Cheng, he is the Dean for the FIU Chaplin School of Hospitality and Tourism, also the organizers of the South Beach Wine and Food Festival, Frederico Falcao, President of Wine of Portugal, Eduardo Chadwick, President of Viña Errázuriz in Chile, Philippe Grogan, CEO from New Zealand Wines, Margaret Enriquez, President and CEO for the House of Crook, Karina Gose, Marketing and Sales Executive for Klein Salze Wines, but she's also the Chairman of Wines of South Africa, the very reputed journalists Robert Joseph and Rupert Joy, Greg Jones, Professor of Lincoln College and one of the most experts in the study of the climate crisis in the world of wine. Rodolphe Lameis, CEO for Vinexposium. Manuel Lousada, he is now the CEO from Almaviva. Stevie Kim, who runs as Managing Director of Vinitaly. Aurelio Montes, the legendary winemaker from Chile, from Viña Montes, also Chairman of Wines of Chile. Bastian Mingers, Director for ProWine. My friend Yang Lu, first and only Chinese master sommelier. David Pearson, who now he used to be with Opus One, now he's with the Meadowood State, Harlan State, which is more famous. Cyril Penn, editor of the Wine Business Monthly. Mike Ratflix, co-founder of Villa Fonte, that legendary winery in Stellenbosch. Stephen Ranacliffe, who will be with us today in our first webinar from Bravo Bank. Linda Reif, President and CEO for the Napa Valley Vineyards. Richard Siddle, editor of The Buyer. And we have Ben Salisbury, founder and president of the Salisbury Creative Group. Michelle Shah, expert consultant for Italian wines. Siobhan Thompson, CEO for Wines of South Africa. Luis Torres, CEO for Go Wine. Alicia Town Frankens, director for Wine Unify. Alistair Tulloch, he's a grape grower and winemaker at Keith Tulloch Wine. Mike Besseth, who is also a guest of ours today, from The Wine Economist, and Mike Van, how do you pronounce that, David? Sorry.
Well, the American is Wayne Bickler, but the German would be Van Bickler.
Okay, from Balsa Communications, a very important communications agency. So those are the speakers we have confirmed so far. We're still working on more names as for different panels, but we're also waiting to hear the confirmation of another very important keynote speaker. The format, of course, it has to be virtual. It's a lot of people are asking us, why don't you do it face to face or at least hybrid? If we still have the threat of the coronavirus, making an event face to face, first of all, it's impossible to insure the event. No insurance company is insuring any event against a pandemic. And if one person gets infected, immediately all other insurances get void and we would be liable. So it was going to be 100% virtual via Zoom. Dates February 23, 24, 25th, 2021. Every day from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Central European time from Spain. In that way, people in Latin America, in the United States, in Canada, can also access some of the conferences. We will have individual conference by our keynote speakers. We will have panels and the keynote speeches that we just mentioned. Now, we have, because the online format allows us to reduce tremendously the cost, and because we are aware that people around the world are going through very difficult times, we have established a ticket at 65 euros. It's the early bird ticket that you can buy before the 15th of December, but we have different schemes of incentives that we're working out with the different regulating bodies, Wines of South Africa, Wines of Portugal, Wines of Chile, Wines of Spain, by which their members will benefit from even an extra discount over the 65 euros. And from that, we will make a donation to all those 3 NGOs that David mentioned before. I think we have a couple of questions, no, David?
I am not showing any questions on my chat, Pancho. Perhaps you're seeing it only on yours, and if that's the case, perhaps you can handle it. I'm not seeing questions coming.
Let me check the questions. While we're retrieving the questions, we would like to thank. Yes.
Please, I wanted to jump into that and thank, again, our sponsors and media partners who've already signed up, one of which is Cyril Penn with Wine Business Communications and Wine Business Monthly, with whom we've worked with before, both as a speaker and as a media partner. And as an occasional editor of mine, I would not be remiss, or Cyril might call me on it, if I were not to correct you, Pancho, that Mr. Coppola is not yet, to the best of our knowledge, an owner of a French winery. He is, however, in addition to his California operation, which is very well known, also the owner-operator of a winery in Oregon called Domaine de Broglie.
Oh, okay. I got it wrong. Apologies. Now, I want to thank especially, a lot of the governing bodies from around the world that have immediately accepted not only to participate, but to support the event, promoting it amongst their members, their wineries, and their local industry. The first one to immediately give us their support was Wine of Portugal through our friend Frederico Falcao. Wines of South Africa, we know the struggle that South Africa has gone through, not only with the water crisis, the sanitary crisis, but also the ban on consumption and sales of alcohol. Wines of Chile, the Spanish Federation of Wine, Federación Española del Vino, they will provide a speaker, which probably will be the new president, but we're waiting to confirm the exact name. New Zealand Wine has provided their support, and also their CEO as a speaker, Linda Rife from Napa Valley Vintners. Of course, we already learn about the 3 NGOs that we're going to support. Bodegas de Argentina, it's a group of Argentinian wineries. They will be tackling the issue of wine tourism. The Spanish Association of Wine Journalists, and of course our friend José Antonio Vidal from the Asociación Española de Enoturismo, Spanish Association of Wine Tourism. And also I want to acknowledge them because tomorrow they are launching the Global Wine Tourism Organization, and we are very happy to be the co-organizers of that event, helping them with our technology for organizing these webinars and this kind of virtual events. Now, David, if you would like to, we have 5 minutes. If somebody wants to ask a question, feel free to write down the question in the chat. We will immediately answer. Also, if you want to tackle any other points, mention anything of interest for our audience, David.
I do have something to hear, Pancho. Apart from the obvious online versus in-person context that Wine Future 2021 will have, what differences, what changes can attendees expect as compared to the previous editions that I mentioned before? So there's curiosity here, how will this be different from previous editions?
Yeah, this is a whole new ball game, the virtual world, and a lot of people still are reluctant to invest, sponsor, support this kinds of event because they lack the networking element, the face-to-face element. But to be honest with you, there's a lot of other benefits that the virtual world has brought to our event management business. For example, the fact that we can reach almost, the sky is the limit. Our Zoom has a capacity of 10,000 viewers, but as I am speaking to you guys and David, we are also broadcasting this media presentation through our Facebook account, and that is completely open to the public. So before, if we had more than 1,000, 1,500 delegates in one of these conferences, that was a big success. Now, we can aim for much larger numbers. That also affects the impact of our speakers. Their message will get much further, but also brands that support us, wine organizations, media partners. Instead of reaching 1,500 during the event, we can, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we go over 3,000 delegates during the February event. There's other advantages that we are discovering as we walk through, during this pandemic is, while you are doing a virtual webinar or broadcast, there's things such as breakout rooms where people that are interested in having private conferences with some of the attendees, or some sponsors would like to meet with potential keynote speakers or some of the speakers in a very specific panel, they can do that. I don't think we will do a virtual trade show area. We are considering that, but that is also one of the facilities that this new virtual world has discovered to us. So, but the most important advantage, David, is that, if we did this event in person, we will be looking at $250,000 at least in expenses, renting the room, paying for flights, hotel accommodation, sound, light, interpretation. Those expenses are reduced considerably, which also allows us to run the event and charge people a symbolic fee of 65 euros. I mean, you're going to listen to some of the most important names of the wine industry worldwide during 3 days for 65 euros. So
for 4 hours
some of the advantages of the virtual world.
For 4 hours each day. Pancho, I've been asked here if we're going to be providing recordings of this particular webcast and a copy of the deck here. So if anybody who's attending this media conference would like a copy of what Pancho has been presented and or recordings of the ongoing webinars that will occur. So we can provide these to our attendees in the media in particular.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are recording the entire presentation today, including the webinar, and those will be made available via our social media and at the website of Wine Future. It's winefuturesummit.com or winefuture2021.com. Today's event, also the upcoming webinars, but also the entire conference will be available on demand. So if you have signed up for the conference, you're not available because of time difference, because you're not available, but you still want to watch some of the panels or the keynote speakers, you just log on with a code that we'll give you, and you will be able to watch all the conference. I think we're going to make it available for a period of 3 months.
Very good. And lastly, Pancho, given that people know about your history working in the sports sector for many, many years, and it's continuing to this day, since Wine Future 2021 will tackle, it is one of its sessions, how it is that the wine business may learn lessons from other industries. Can you please quickly share, before we begin our first webinar, please quickly share your insights into what the wine business may learn from the sporting world's recent challenges?
There's a lot of things that both worlds can learn from each other. It's interesting because we're doing a very similar a very similar summit for the tennis professionals of the world right before the French Open, 11 to the 13th of May next year, because the wine industry and the tennis industry are suffering some of the same issues. I mean, social distancing in tennis is not possible. Tennis, the average age of a tennis spectator has gone up to 59 years of age, more or less like what's happening in the world of wine, that the age of wine consumers is going up and up. Less people are playing tennis, less people are drinking wine. We have the same economical impacts, or very similar. But one thing that we can learn from the world of sports, not only tennis in general, first of all, is, sports people tend to be very committed, leadership, teamwork. Those are things that, those are the values that sports brings to the table. I always tell people in my conference, if we would learn from our athletes such as Rafa Nadal, Roger Federer, or any top athlete, if we would learn their ethics when it comes to work and results and performance, and apply it to a lot of the politicians around the world and a lot of the businesses, we would be much better off. So that's probably what we can learn. The best lesson we can learn from the world of sports is their working ethics, their sacrifice, their leadership, their teamwork.
Excellent. Thank you, Pancho. Shall we move on? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to introduce our first webinar and our guest speakers of today, please.
Absolutely, my pleasure. It's been my pleasure to work with both of these gentlemen in Porto and in other situations as well. At our first webinar, tackling the issue of wine economics and finances in these challenging times, we have with us two gentlemen who will be joining us again in February. These will be weekly Wednesday webinars that will occur beginning at 6 p.m. Central European time. Work that out for whatever time zone you may happen to be in on these various Wednesdays. That we're going to be doing it bi-weekly for 2020, and then as we build momentum to the summit in February, weekly beginning January 6th. So joining us for today is the global sector strategist for beverages at Rabobank, working out of New York, Stephen Raneklev, and the editor at The Wine Economist, working out of Washington State, Mike Veseth. Gentlemen, thank you for joining and launching the first of our weekly webinars here for Wine Future 2021.
Thanks.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Well, and let me say good morning to everybody. Since I'm near Seattle, it is just 9 a.m. and it's early today. If Steve and I seem just a little anxious, it's not because we're nervous about talking to you. Is it, Steve? What would you say is making you anxious today?
Yeah, a little bit of, we're still a little unsettled from last night, right? I don't think many of us slept very much.
No, here in the United States, we're thinking about the future, but from a political standpoint, and politics affects so much these days, everything is very uncertain. As of this morning, the United States is no longer part of the Paris Climate Change Accord, for example. This was the date that President Trump issued for us to leave it. And so sort of a momentous day to talk about the crises that we have and the leadership issues that we face. So let me start. Steve and I are going to, we don't know exactly what we're going to say, I think, in February, but we're thinking ahead to the sorts of issues that we need to consider as we move out of crises into a new world. And I've been on The Wine Economist. I've been working through trying to think about what the world would be like. And it seems, in addition to the climate crisis that is ongoing and getting more and more of our attention, that as we move from 2020 into 2021, the two pandemics are things that we need to think about and maybe to rethink about. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed many things. I would like to say it changes everything, but it changes a lot. When I took a journalism class years and years ago, they told me that people want to know who, what, when, where, how, and why. Who, what, when, where, how, and why. If you told people that, then they would begin to understand what to think. And it occurs to me that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed for the wine industry and for many industries. It has changed the answers to all of those questions. Who consumes wine? When, where, how, why? Those questions define an occasion. And all industries that are occasion driven, like wine, will find that there is a tremendous difference in the world. Certainly, the most obvious change in wine has been as Pancho has said, has been the collapse of the on-premise or restaurant and bar sales. That those occasions are all but gone in many places. And so, as we think about the future, we need to think about what the answers to those who, what, when, where, how, why questions are likely to be, how they will change, and what we in the wine industry need to do to rethink how we respond to that. The second pandemic that we need to consider, of course, is the economic crisis, the economic recession. And I call it a pandemic because, of course, we know that economic crises are contagious, that they're contagious from household to household. Your income is someone else's spending. If they spend less, then you have less income, so you spend less. And it is like a super spreader event, really, that happens in the whole economy. A lot of the of course, the economic crisis has been deep and uneven, and coming out of it has been very problematic. A lot of the discussions that I have participated in have been sort of an alphabet soup sort of a discussion, which is, will it be a V-shaped recession or a W-shaped recession or a U or a K? If I could stand up now, I would do the YMCA of the different forms that the recession could take from this. But slowly, as the clouds clear, we begin to think about what the world is going to look like after we move through the alphabet soup. And the Economist Intelligence Unit late last week suggested that we start thinking about a world, a global economy that has a slower growth than we're used to, lower inflation or even deflation, and much, much, much higher levels of debt. And so it's a world that is very constrained. Will have fewer degrees of freedom, less flexibility from an economic standpoint. And so we need to begin to think about how the wine industry will operate in a world that looks more like that, a world that is less global in terms of goods, but because it's more digital, and this is Pancho's point from just a minute ago, less global in terms of goods, but perhaps more global in terms of services and knowledge than we have had before. And how does that affect wine? We'll have to think about this new environment. And I think we have to learn. We have to learn from our own experiences, but maybe especially we have to keep this open mind and try to learn from what we see happening in other sectors around the world. Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. And always great to hear you. Always appreciate kind of your perspective that you take on things. And I think, you know, what you're saying dovetails nicely into what I wanted to talk a little bit about today. You know, we obviously the pandemic has really hit our clients and you know, or particularly in the wine industry around the world. And I wanted to shift gears a little bit. You know, we've spent a little bit of time trying to look at, you know, what are some of the solutions? What do we see beverage companies, not just wine companies, what are some strategies we see beverage companies using to respond to a changing consumer and a changing customer base, right? Because they're all being affected. And if you look at 2020, as we've said, the change in, the impact that this has had on the pandemic has had on consumers, and the knock-on effects particularly for the on-trade, have been devastating. We see this most notably in markets like Spain, where more than half of consumption happens in the on-trade. But even in the U.S., where we've been able to shift all of that consumption, even continue to grow volumetrically by shifting consumption to the off-trade, still a lot of challenges for the market. And if we look forward, obviously, as we've kind of touched on, we are not out of the woods yet. We've got another round of lockdown being announced in a number of different markets. And even after the lockdowns clear up, where obviously we see some kind of long-term permanent changes in consumer behavior that are going to affect the market, right? More working from home, less business travel. And even before this, younger consumers in some markets were going out to bars and restaurants less. And we think this kind of accelerates some of those trends. And I guess it's also, we also kind of look at it and think it's important to remind everyone, this is not just affecting the on-trade. This is kind of the entire value chain. This is kind of rippling through the value chain. Obviously, on-premise operators are struggling to survive. But distributors are now looking at how do they manage their inventory levels, what products do they need to carry. They're having to manage staff, right? There are a lot of the distributors we talk with have let go of a number of their personnel reductions to the sales staff that dealt with the on-trade, and even retailers that theoretically have benefited from the shift to the off-trade. Right, they're struggling to keep shelves stocked, and they see increased costs, and they're really focusing. The challenge is they're reducing the number of SKUs they carry, so it's been challenging, to even access that growth. But so the on-trade has really been hit, and that the thing that I think we always come back to is this is more than just the loss of a channel, right? The on-trade is that shift to the off-trade. It's not just it's not just shift of volume. It's the on-trade is where we sell more premium products, so it's a loss of margin that gets hit. It's where a lot of smaller wineries access the market. But for beverage companies broadly, the on-trade is also where consumers often experience brands for the first time. It's where you go and you discover that craft beer on tap, or where the waiter recommends that wine by the glass that you fall in love with, or the bartender makes that cocktail that you love. This is where brands are built. And what we've lost is really a very important platform for engaging consumers for the first time. And that's part of what we need to be thinking about as an industry, is how do we engage the consumer moving forward. And that's where it's been really interesting. We've seen a lot of innovation in this space over the past year. A lot of companies doing a lot of interesting things to respond to this changing environment. And back in September, my team and I, we started logging this list of really interesting innovations that we've seen companies making, not just beverage companies, not just wine companies, but beverage companies around the world. We kind of came up with a list, and we sorted through those and kind of grouped those into about 5 different categories, and wanted to go through some of those today. And some of these are really maybe more short term and around dealing with COVID, but some of them I think really point to where we want to be thinking about long-term strategic changes for the industry. Maybe the first one was just recognizing that we need to support the on-trade, the bars and restaurants that are the lifeblood of the industry. A lot of initiatives from beverage companies, whether it's brewers taking back, unsold kegs, or extending payment terms where they can, or, some companies providing them with hygiene kits, just doing what they can. And in Scotland, one of the large brewers tenants made free beer available to kind of get consumers back into pubs. And if there's one thing that'll get a Scotsman to face a potentially deadly virus, it's the offer of free beer. And so that was kind of the one thing. It's supporting the on-premise recovery is part of what we need to be doing, and maybe even as part of that, the next one is similar. It's kind of retooling the on-premise, and we've seen companies like Starbucks shifting to more drive-through, whatever, more ordering online and pick up in store. companies, wineries helping restaurants with more digital QR type menus to make it more touchless and seamless and prevent the spread and give consumers a little bit more comfort around going out. And those are, maybe more short-term things, but then we start to move into some of the really interesting ones that I think are worth highlighting. And one was, kind of the brand building and touching on connecting with consumer fatigue, right? We've seen a number of different kind of ad campaigns. Some of them like Guinness, the "We Will March Again," talking about, okay, we've lost St. Patrick's Day, but there's a sense of shared sacrifice and so forth. Some of them were more serious. Some of them were much more lighthearted. There was a picture of a 93-year-old woman in Pennsylvania that was holding up her sign in the window of "I need more beer," and Coors Light sent her 150 beers and kind of got her through the weekend, I guess. And so it was, but that became the basis of an ad campaign of "Need More Beer," and they were, helping consumers in the pandemic by shipping out free 6-packs. But the underlying message here, I think that's worth highlighting, is that, in these times, it's really hard. Everyone's strapped for cash. But what we've seen is, from past pandemics, the research suggests that, investing in your brand during a downturn can be hard, but tends to pay long-term results. And we do need to be thinking about these things from a long-term perspective as well. So it's worth kind of highlighting that. The other one, the last two I think are really interesting. One is, just efforts to recreate the on-premise at home. We've seen a lot of really interesting initiatives recognizing that consumers are going to be doing more at home, consuming more at home, both in the short term and likely in the long term. Some interesting initiatives. Signature Brewing, a craft brewer in the UK, came up with a pub in a box concept where you can go on their website and order their pub in a box package, and it comes with a case of beer, glassware, chips, a bespoke music playlist on Spotify, a game, right? It's everything you need to kind of recreate the pub experience in your living room. So I thought it was really interesting, and it kind of allows you to recreate that on-premise experience at home. And then also really interesting in China, some of the e-commerce platforms, the new retailers like JD.com doing what they call some of these live streaming, these virtual clubbing events where you can kind of consumers tap into a kind of a live event, and it's kind of a party scene, and you can do that from your living room. And a lot of the large beverage brands, Budweiser, Jägermeister, are advertising on these platforms and during these events and seeing a real lift in sales. So it's interesting to look at how do we take those things, take these experiences that used to be on premise and shift them to at home. And we've seen some of this, right, in the wine industry, more virtual tastings and so forth. And I think that there's more for us to do there, right? There's more for us to explore in terms of, how do we work with restaurants with their, to support the takeout, the rise in takeout and delivery. Is there more that we can do to support that? Are there things that we can do, the meal deliveries and so forth, the Fresh Direct? I think there's a lot for us to explore. And then, maybe the last one, which is Pancho touched on at the beginning, talking about e-commerce. And we've spent a lot of time looking at e-commerce as a phenomenon in all of this. And we've started over the past couple of years really tracking what's happening and trying to understand it and where the opportunities are. And, quite honestly, before the pandemic, just about every major beverage company that we talked to, everyone talked a great e-commerce game. They all talked about how important it was. But the truth is, behind closed doors, every e-commerce team at every major beverage company was saying the same thing. The company's talking a good game, but nobody's really investing in it, and they were all starved for resources. Now with the pandemic, I think undoubtedly everyone recognizes that e-commerce has been the big winner. Huge shift. All the e-commerce platforms are up 200 and 300%. And, so we've seen tremendous growth, and it's really stoked a lot of interest. And so it's changing the way people are thinking about it. And really it's about time. And, we've seen this we're seeing a lot of increased investment in e-commerce, both just kind of everyone talking about how do I build out my e-commerce team, But also, when you look at some of the moves being made in the market today, Constellation Brands buying Empathy Wines, that's really about trying to understand e-commerce. The big news that came out yesterday, the Dr. Oetker Group in Germany making a $1 billion investment in the e-commerce platform Flash and Post. And the interesting thing to me about both of those is, these are not just about sales channels, right? This is not thinking about e-commerce just as a sales channel. It's really about trying to understand the consumer, right? It's about engaging the consumer where they are and trying to connect with them and learn their habits and so forth. It's about creating connections, because we're losing that ability to connect with the consumer in the on-premise. In some ways, we need to find ways to recreate that, and e-commerce is a great way to do that. And for those of us, for those that are on that haven't heard, we do a podcast with my team. It's called Liquid Assets. And, we've had a guy named Wayne Dwan, the head of e-commerce from Constellation Brands, on a couple of times, and he's a great guest. And he makes, he provides some really great insight into how to think about e-commerce. And one of the things that he said was, you think of e-commerce, and the reason why a lot of companies didn't invest in e-commerce previously is because they looked at just the sales part, and they said, oh, it's too small to care about. And what they don't get is, e-commerce is like an iceberg, and the part that you see, the online sales, are really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that's happening under the surface that's worth looking at, right? How you engage consumers. And a good e-commerce strategy really allows you to be agnostic about where the consumer buys, right? Because you're engaging them, whether they're buying in a brick and mortar store or, at a restaurant, or buying on an online platform. And so it's, I think there's a lot for us to do in terms of building out our understanding of e-commerce and investing in e-commerce to build sales regardless of where the consumer makes their final purchase, but help create pathways to purchase through that. And there's some really interesting, opportunities coming up, some kind of emerging channels, even things like, we talk a lot about this, just Peloton, the exercise bicycle, where you're connecting with a community of other people, like-minded people. They actually have a Facebook page called Pelo Winos, where that community, really passionate, is also talking about wine on Facebook, right? And they're making recommendations. So how do we connect with some of those things? And I think, that's what makes it really interesting for us to think about, as we struggle with the on-trade and the challenges there. How do we invest in e-commerce in a way that allows us to really connect with consumers and connect with younger consumers where they are? So that's kind of where we see some of the investments going from beverage companies around the world, and we kind of continue to track this and look for where we see interesting ideas. So with that, I think maybe, Mike, we can open it up to some questions.
Well, yeah, Steve, I wanted to follow up on your last point, because when we think of e-commerce, often we think about it as just this transactional space where it makes it easier for us to, if we're successful, we're able to sell a product to consumers and consumers can find us. But your last point was more that there can be communities created through e-commerce. They begin to think about Amazon, where people leave ratings, people interact with one another, that the possibilities are not endless, but they're more than what we would do if we're just trying to move product out the door. And so I think looking for the best practices of electronic commerce generally, and building virtual communities around our brands and around the interests, I think this can be very powerful.
Yeah, I fully agree, Mike. And, we've spent a little bit of time. We also did a podcast where we looked at, among others, Naked Wines and their strategy. We kind of compared and contrasted Naked Wines and BrewDog and some of the things that they had in common. And one, it was, for Naked Wines, and they get a lot of pushback, and, they get a lot of critiques within the industry. But one of the things they do really well is create that online community and a sense of purpose as well, right? They allow people to talk about it, and they can take that knowledge, that understanding and use that as they think about how they, create the next brand. But the other thing is, when we talked about this with Wayne, thinking beyond just the sales channel, one of the points that he made was I thought was just so eye-opening for me. He used to work at Walgreens as the head of e-commerce for Walgreens, and he said, the mother with a young kid who has a cough, looking for cough medicine, will go on and do her research first, but she's not going to wait for the delivery. She's going to run out and buy it. So the actual purchase happens in the brick and mortar store, but it's having a strong e-commerce platform, a strong e-commerce strategy that allows you to win, at that maybe zero moment of truth, as they say. So it's, there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. Do we have any questions coming in there, Mike?
David, do we have questions from our participants?
We haven't any that I can read. They are welcome to send them to us, but I haven't any coming up at this time. But there is one thing I wanted to bring up myself. And first of all, thank you for touching upon a myriad of issues, some of which are going to be bouncing off topics we already have waiting for us in February outside of yours, because your issue is so foundational that in that it can touch on many things. And thank you for that. And I just wanted to say too, a little plug for the both of you. Mike was referring a bit to the Wine Intelligence Unit in an article he just posted recently on the Wine Economist. I encourage people to go read it, the entirety of it. And I am a listener as well to the Liquid Assets podcast that Stephen's involved with there at Rabobank. I recommend people dropping into that as well. But in this, gentlemen, there's been issues that have come up in the last couple of days even about a major decline that was announced by Pau Roca, one of our speakers from the OIV, in the production of wine in the 2020 vintages. And we see that happening, and it's not just in the West Coast because of what's been going on, the stress that people have existed with the fires over there recently, but there's been a decline for 2020 in terms of production. That, coupled with, should we say, tentativeness of investment at this time because of the pandemic and other issues, how do you see this spinning out in the short and the long term?
Mike, you want to take that first?
Well, yeah, let me start. As we entered 2020, the discussion in California was about the structural surplus of wine that we had. And then indeed, there's been, with I think 1 year's exception, a very large structural global surplus of wine for the last 20 years. And so there, we in California, we debate about whether that's insufficient demand or too much supply. And as an economist, both of those, supply and demand, go about determining things. The return to more normal global supply of wine that Pau Roca talked about in the OIV's press conference last week is probably a welcome thing, because it gives us a chance to catch our breath. And during this time, a very large supply of wine would have flooded us and I think given us more problems than they would solve. There really is the question moving forward about how we go about bringing supply and demand into a balance, and then B, what we hoped would be sustainable growth. And I don't think that the things that the OIV reported last week maybe help with the balance, but we still have unanswered questions about the growth.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with what you're saying, Mike. I would add kind of maybe 2 points to that. One, when we see significant volatility in production from one year to another, we can't necessarily kind of decry climate change, but the more volatility that we see, the more I think the stronger the argument gets. And so I think that's something for us to watch, and I think it creates a stronger argument for the need for change, the need for investments to stop climate change. The other thing is, it will be interesting. We still don't have a great beat on, exactly how decline in production. At least I don't have a great beat quite yet on how that decline in production matches up with the decline in demand, right? The one of the challenges we always have is, we kind of lump together all wine production. We know that it's not always a perfect fit. There can be surplus in some place like Spain and really still have shortages in California or other markets, right? So I guess because we talk about these things on average, and I always make this comment, right? On average, it's on average you have your feet in the freezer, your head in the oven. On average, you're comfortable, but that's kind of in the wine industry, not how it works.
Okay, gentlemen, we have 2 questions that have come in, and then we have to close that down after that. So first of all, and judging from the time signature and the language, this is coming from Central Europe. In the US, the problem isn't finding an importer, the problem is finding an importer. E-commerce then is not possible without having that first in place. Most distributors won't want to first focus on bigger brands and don't want new wines. This is one person's opinion only. So importers aren't looking for new brands either. What would you say to this?
Oh, it's a tremendous problem. It's breaking into the U.S. market is tremendously difficult. If you're an international producer, especially, it's obviously tremendously difficult. What many of my international friends don't recognize it is that breaking in is kind of difficult if you're a small producer in the United States as well. Certainly, e-commerce won't solve this. And I would argue that the who, what, when, where, how, why changes that we're seeing are actually going to make it even more difficult, because as Steve pointed out, the on-trade, the bars and restaurants, well, that was a place where a small international producer might get a foot in the door, and that a importer distributor specializing in on-trade could actually make some progress for us. And now as we shift to more multiple retailers, to more big box stores, to more supermarkets, where the focus will be on a small number of large distributors, that it will only get more difficult in the next year.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think the only thing I would add is, we are seeing the rise in some markets of this platform LibDib that allows somebody to get access to distribution. They won't, they're not there to promote your brand. You'd have to do all the legwork yourself. But if you can, that kind of opens doors. You can go through channels like MHW or Park Street and into LibDib, I believe, and get access. You would have to do all the legwork yourself. So, but that could at least get you onto a platform like wine.com. I believe that there's, that's legally possible.
And lastly, gentlemen, what's the most advanced virtual community that you've experienced connecting effectively to the consumer?
You mean apart from this one, David?
Yeah, let's give us that toss. Thank you.
That's a really good question. I mean,
yeah.
It depends if you're, there are, I would say virtual communities. Again, I would go back to maybe Naked Wines does a really nice job of bringing consumers together. It's their own brand, so it's not one that you can necessarily break into. But then I would say, and then outside of wine, I guess Peloton, in terms of models to look at, Dollar Shave Club, some of those things, but drawing a blank on some of the great ones for wine. Pella Wines, I think, is probably the closest off the top of my head. If you're talking about just
that'll be a nice tease to have people follow us for your session come February. How about that?
There you go.
A clear, intelligent answer then.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Listen, thank you, everyone. Pancho has joined us again. I want to thank you both for helping us launch our webinars. The next one will be again 2 weeks from today on the 18th of November, featuring the three donation recipients. They'll have all representatives there talking about how your contributions will help them in their great endeavors. Gentlemen, I'm going to hand over to Pancho, but before you do, I want to ask you please to hang on with us, our speakers, for 2 minutes as we close. Pancho?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank both Mike and Stephen. We want to give people a taste of what the conference is going to be all about. And we're going to have this every 2 weeks, as David well said. The next one will be on the 18th of November, same time, 6 p.m. Central Europe time. And we will get to meet the representative from the 3 NGOs that we're going to try to help, which are the Porto Protocol, SOS Cape Town, and remind me of the name of the third one.
North Bay Jobs with Justice.
North Bay Jobs with Justice. Now, I really want to thank, I was looking at the list of the people that have joined us today. We have some very important names from different parts of the world. And I thank you guys because we have people from, Asia, which, it's very late in the morning there. We have people from South Africa. We have people from Latin America, from the United States, from Spain. I want to thank you for joining us today, your interest in learning what Wine Future 2021 is going to be all about. It was born in 2009 as a response to a crisis. We feel very strongly with David that it's our duty, that every industry, we have to get together, we have to unite our efforts, we have to inspire the many people that are suffering losses of jobs, the glass fires in Sonoma, the lack of water in South Africa, plus all the tremendous effect that this pandemic is having around the world. It's not going to go away. I have a medical background, unfortunately, because I know that it's going to take at least the whole of the next year until we come to terms with the virus and the vaccine is distributed around the world. In the meantime, we hope that we can inspire people, we can provide solutions, but most of all, we can provide inspiration to, as I said before, the many people that are suffering, that are struggling because of this damn virus, if you allow me. Please visit the website. It's winefuturesummit.com. Also, we are open to suggestions of topics that you think we have neglected, people that you think would be interesting to hear from. And we hope to see you at our next webinar, once again, 18th of November, 6 p.m. Central European Time, talking about these 3 NGOs. Who are they? What do they do? How can we help? And especially the Porto Protocol. I feel very strong about the Porto Protocol because I added my little help to make it happen. And I want to thank from here Adrian Bridge because it's a great initiative and he's always supported us. It's time for us to support his initiative. David, thank you so much. I think this went very well, and we just started. I think we started a project that is going to be very, very useful for the wine industry, and I feel proud of having done this.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Pancho.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.